Yeah, we're good.
Okay. First of all, I just want to thank everybody for being here today to come to the Symposium in general and also to kind of see what our ethics bowl team is about. My name is Rowan Havelock. I'm a member of UVU's ethics bowl team. This is my third year total doing ethics bowl, but not my third year with UVU. It's something that I did when I was at Snow College and then continued here because I liked it so much. Just to kind of give you an overview of what the Ethics Bowl is, since usually when I tell people I'm on that team, they're like, okay, well, what is that? I've never heard of it in my life. Ethics Bowl is a competition in which teams from different schools gather to have what is essentially like a conversation about ethical issues. So each year we get a set of cases that deal with contemporary issues in ethics, usually whatever's most pressing, and we prepare for 2 months before the competition by going through those cases, determining what all of the major ethical issues are, and kind of trying to come up with what we think is the best solution to that. And then at the competition, we get some of those cases to argue for, and I pass to Hash to tell you a little bit more about that process.
First, I'd just like to thank whoever brought the pizza. I think that's probably part of the biggest reason we have such a crowd for us.
And you can thank Courtney Burns right here.
Courtney Burns, there we go. The Ethics Bowl is, I actually am like a rookie to this team. A lot of people have done it before, but this was my first year doing it. And I know when I first heard of it, I was like, Ethics Bowl? What is that? Some like passive-aggressive vegan dish at Zupa's or something? But the Ethics Bowl is really, really cool. We've been talking a lot today about conspiracy theories and basically really interesting disagreements in our societies today. And I mean, I'm not saying that we don't appreciate your rants on Facebook, but as has been brought up, sometimes we're really bad at dealing with those and finding ways, constructive and productive ways, to deal with our disagreements in society. And I think Ethics Bowl is honestly one of the best things I've seen pushes in the direction of a good way to deal with these things, because it's a conversation, but specifically it's a civil, respectful conversation that tries to figure out not who's wrong and why so-and-so shouldn't be in the position that they are, but really to figure out what we should be doing as moral people in our society. Try to figure out how to behave ethically. That's what the Ethics Bowl is about. And the format is pretty simple. You have teams, 2 teams from different schools usually. This is us against us, but we'll get over it. But essentially you prepare on a given case and then you're given a question. You don't know what the question is going to be beforehand, so it's a surprise. And then you're given 2 minutes to prepare your presentation. You usually give a 10-minute presentation based off of that 2 minutes prep. Today we're going to be giving a shorter amount of time because we don't have a ton of time to spare. Then you give your presentation, the opposing team gives their response, you give a response to their response, and then the judges get to ask questions. And at the end of the day, what we're looking for is not winning points over the other side. It's focusing on having a productive, clear, articulated conversation about ethics, regardless of what the positions that people take on either side. And with that, I'm going to pass to our coach here to moderate this presentation.
So I'll be playing the role of moderator today. Before we start, we'll have each team introduce themselves. So we'll start over here with Team 1.
Hi, I'm Hatch, and I am a philosophy major. This is like my first year here at UVU.
I'm Elena, and I'm actually not on the team yet, but I'm planning on it in the fall.
Hi, I'm Josh. I am art history and communication major.
I'm Caitlin. I'm a senior philosophy major. This is my 3rd or 4th year and my last year on the team. So.
Hi, I'm Rowan. I guess I already kind of covered this, but I'm a philosophy major and gender studies minor. This is my first year with UVU in Ethics Bowl, but my third overall.
And my name's Adam Cook. Wow. Okay.
I'm a senior philosophy major with an ethics and minor. I'll be doing ethical lecture for the first time.
My name's Timberlyn. I'm also a philosophy major and an ethics minor, and this is my first year doing ethics bowl.
I'm Rebecca Cobb, and I'm a philosophy major, and this was my first year on the team.
So you've all been given the case that this presentation is based on, birds aren't real. So we'll just kind of jump into this. Team 1 will have 2 minutes to prepare and then 6 minutes to present. The question is satire the best way to expose conspiracy theories? So again, you'll have 2 minutes to prepare and then 6 minutes to present. Okay, team 1, you'll have 6 minutes to present. I'll give you a 3 and a 1 minute warning. Go ahead and start when you're ready.
Okay, I would first like to thank everyone for being here. Thank our moderator for giving us the question and helping this flow smoothly. The question we've received today is from one of the national cases, Birds Aren't Real, and this case focuses on conspiracy theories, specifically the birds aren't real conspiracy theory. And this theory focuses, it was created by someone to actually be a satirical joke about conspiracy theories. It was supposed to be so ridiculous that everyone could laugh at, how crazy it was. It says that birds are replaced by robots to surveillance on us by the government. It's kind of funny, but it was actually taken seriously by some people and has gained a lot of popular recognition. And the question we received is kind of about that. The question is satire the best way to expose conspiracy theories? Our answer to the question is no. Satire is not the best way to expose conspiracy theories. For clarity's sake, let me define a few things. First, we understand conspiracy theory to be a theory that focuses on the existence of a malicious group that is, through secretive means, manipulating society in some way. We also understand satire to be a type of humor that, through exaggeration or purposeful misrepresentation, attempts to poke fun at real-world events and maybe bring more attention to them. Now I'm going to pass to my roommates, not my roommates, I'm going to pass to my teammates to explain that further. But first, I'd just like to say where I'm coming from. Personally, I was raised and taught conspiracy theories as if they were real. I grew up believing that 9/11 was an inside job, that the moon landing never happened, and the whole 9 yards. And needless to say, since then I've had a lot of opportunities to talk, debate, and argue with people about conspiracy theories. And my one big takeaway is that, like has been brought up earlier, having conversations that say some people are reasonable, some people are stupid, and disrespecting people's oftentimes sincere beliefs really isn't going to be the solution if we're looking for a solution to this problem. And I'm going to pass to my teammate, Elena.
Thanks, Hash. The first question we asked in regards to this case is, why are we looking to expose conspiracy theories? Is it to bring awareness that the theories exist, to make fun of the people who believe them, to give us comfort while we have to deal with them? Is it to try and change their minds? Because conspiracy theories suspect groups of conspiring, they often fuel prejudices such as anti-Semitism or racism. We're more concerned about this potential harm than whether or not the conspiracy theory is true or false. We came to this conclusion by applying our principles, which are respect, beneficence, and care. We use these principles because we believe we owe others reasons for our actions that they cannot reasonably reject, and principles are more easily understood than specific moral theories. We would define respect as treating every person as an end in themselves and not as a means to an end, or manipulation. We believe satire, such as in the birds aren't real case, isn't the best way to expose conspiracy theories because it fails to meet our principles. It's not respectful to those it's making fun of, it doesn't help increase trust between people with differing opinions, and because both groups only become more certain of their pre-existing beliefs, which doesn't provide an overall good. To talk about what we think should be done, I'll pass to my teammate Josh.
Thanks, Elena. We believe that respectful discourse is the best way to address differing opinions. Firstly, coexisting with people that may not think like us is necessary to have a civil society. Building a sense of trust is imperative. Right now, mistrust is rampant. The only way to repair this mistrust is through consistent and predictable interactions that show each side is willing to be respectful to the other's opinions, whether we agree or not. If people feel safe to share their ideas, it'll be easier to identify bad ones before they're driven underground. This leads to our second point. It is important there is a free exchange of ideas. Allowing for good and bad ideas to be circulated is important so that we can make our own choices about what opinions to hold. This also forces us to re-examine and reaffirm our own opinions as we have to constantly defend our opinions against others. Therefore, respectful discourse allows us to rebuild trust and for the free exchange of ideas, which respects the autonomy of others, ensures that good ideas are discussed, and denies the use of coercion or manipulation, fulfilling all three principles of respect, beneficence, and care. One argument against this is that bad ideas would just grow exponentially, like what we see on social media. To this point, we would say that the core of social media is not centered around respectful discourse. Online forums are extremely impersonal, which makes it hard to build trusting relationships. Also, social media algorithms do not allow for the free exchange of ideas and instead increase confirmation bias that isolates the circulation of ideas. Now I'll pass to my teammate Caitlin to conclude.
Oh, okay. All right, thank you. That was really good, Josh. Thank you so much. So to conclude our case, how much time do we have left? Okay. So in answer to the question, do we feel that satire is the best way to expose conspiracy theories, our team would say that no, it is not the best way to expose conspiracy theories because it does not foster respectful dialogue between differing parties. And is that kind of big, guys? Okay, sorry, I was a little thrown in the last minute. And yeah, and so we'll concede the rest of our time. Thank you, Jeff.
Now team 2 will have 1 minute to confer and then 4 minutes to respond.
Okay, first of all, we'd like to thank teammates for such a wonderful presentation. We love that your position aims to start healthy dialogue and bridge differences between groups rather than start from a place of criticism. When considering the case, our team also agreed that satire, though sometimes helpful, is not the best way to address conspiracy theories. However, we do have a few concerns and questions, primarily surrounding the treatment of conspiracies within your case. Within your case, you place an emphasis on not treating those who believe conspiracy theories as conspiracy theorists, but talking with them as people who have have beliefs. The case we've been given focuses on satirical conspiracy and brings attention, to the variety and subject matter that conspiracy covers. So my question is, can we consider all conspiracy theories equally, and can this conversational approach be the same for all? To expand on this, I'll pass to Adam.
Thank you, Rowan. I obviously agree with most of the position that's been expressed here. I just have some questions to clarify as well. First off, in our ability to have respectful discourse at all, many people argue that things like satire are necessary because there essentially is no other way to overcome the cultural boundary that exists between people who really believe in conspiracy theories and those who don't. And although satire specifically certainly doesn't foster respectful discourse, I will grant you that entirely, we haven't necessarily addressed the side of how are we going to have this respectful discourse at all if people really are starting from the basis of you're insane and I'm not. And the other question is, as to Rowan's point, not only can we treat all conspiracy theories themselves equally, should we be granting the metaphysical credence to a conspiracy theory that we would grant to what we might call an empirical theory? So in our respectful dialogue, is it possible to be truly respected if we're not coming at it from a biased approach, if that makes sense? Are we just giving full credence to any theory that's brought up, and how would that, have problems in empiricism and study?
Thank you. I just have a question. So individuals who believe in conspiracy theories, they tend to surround themselves with people who are like-minded and will be defensive with any conflict. It's not just that they're wrong, but it's that their entire worldview is shattered. So I'm wondering if you think respectful dialogue alone will sufficiently fill the gaps between the mistrust of education and the many conspiracy theorists, or many conspiracy theorist groups, with manipulative or fallacious language vying for more members. And I'll pass the mic to Rebecca for the final question.
So just with our final consideration, you explained that satire is not the best method to utilize in the discussion of conspiracy theories. This implies that it is at least to some degree a method, which it seems like we've been talking about. But if that's the case, how do you see satire being useful within these conversations, if at all? And I'll pass to Roland.
So just to briefly summarize, the primary questions we would like you to address, given civil conversation as the answer, with this approach, can all conspiracy theories be treated equally? And within that approach, how would you address concerns regarding the mistrust of education and the way conspiracies discredit empirical evidence? If you have time, we would love to hear more about the role satire might play, but those are our major concerns. Thank you, and we look forward to hearing your response.
Team 1, you'll have 1 minute to confer and 4 minutes to reply.
Thank you so much for your questions. This is a really important discussion, and so I'm glad you brought up the points that you did. I'm going to answer two of the questions that you brought up today. So the first one is, do we consider all conspiracy theories equally? And our response is that we wouldn't. We don't consider all conspiracy theories equal. The theories that encourage prejudice against groups of people, such as encouraging racism, are conspiracy theories that lead to harm. Theories that can cause harm in other ways, such as measles outbreaks, from conspiracy theories about measles vaccines, are also important to address. But they require asking other ethical questions, such as about vaccine mandates, and a response should be focused on the specific harm being caused. We would still apply principles of respect, beneficence, and care to those questions. The second question I'll answer is that we're wondering how this allowing conspiracy theories to be discussed has respect for metaphysical and empirical information that we have, and how that relates to education. So our emphasis on respectful discourse comes from considering how conspiracy theorists are familiar with opposition and to their beliefs. We won't be able to make any positive changes by simply telling them that they're wrong and then all the facts about what they should believe. We don't think that we need to make the education system inclusive to conspiracy theories or start questioning every fact of conspiracy theories question. But in addressing concerns about the harm we've mentioned, the prejudices that conspiracy theories can create, respectful discourse can help address by nature of being respectful, which increases willingness to coexist with people of different beliefs. And now I'll pass to my teammate Ash.
Yeah, I'd just like to turn our minds back a little bit to a question we asked in our original presentation, and that was, what are we trying to do here? Are we trying to expose these ideas, trying to tell people that they're wrong? Are we trying to find a way to live together? And our response to that question has been that we want to find a way to live respectfully together and to minimize harm, and that's what we're trying to focus on here. So this idea of holding things equal and having respectful conversations, it's not necessarily that we're trying to have respectful conversations where we tell people they're wrong. We're trying to have respectful dialogues about how we can make this work together without disrespecting people. That's a little bit of a crucial difference there. And I'd like to just touch on what Timberland actually pointed out, which is, will this work? And I think the answer to that is yes and no. It does work sometimes, and I'm evidence of that. I mean, once upon a time, I was on the other side of a lot of these conspiracy theories, and now I'm not. And the way that I got to where I am right now was because I had people who were respectful, who weren't trying to push me down. All they were trying to do was just live in the same world with me and not have us butt heads all the time. They're just trying to be respectful and to make things work. And so it worked for me. Other people, it might not work for, but it is an ethical approach to this. And I'm going to pass to Josh here.
Well, thank you for your thoughtful questions. To build a little bit more on what Hash said, to address when is satire good. So satire and comedy are good, lighthearted forms of communication in many environments, but you wouldn't have a comedian perform at a funeral. So just like you wouldn't have satire in an environment where the possibility for a person's belief system could come under question. Also, those that believe in conspiracy theories will most likely not consider changing their opinions or listen to different opinions unless they believe you are taking them seriously. Satire is counterproductive to this need.
Okay, go ahead.
No, it's okay.
Sure.
Well,
I love
I don't want to break the rules.
Yeah.
I just wanted to touch a little bit on what Adam was sort of honing in on about, if not through satire, then how do we, like, it's always nice to say, like, let's have respectful dialogue, but then how do we actually accomplish that? And I wanted to touch on how our coach, Professor Nielsen, and then our team and Ethics Bowl as a whole is really focused on getting ethics out of the classroom and into the community, and that's a really big focus for just this organization as a whole. And so we spend a lot of time doing things like this, and we also have been working really hard on getting Ethics Bowl as a format for conversation. This idea of like timing it and putting emphasis on the respect has been really beneficial, and we do a lot of outreach into high schools and to the local prisons and doing ethics slams in the communities. And so as far as a solution-based approach, myself and I think most of my team feel that this format for discussion is really beneficial, and we get implemented into society by using our higher education institutions as outreach programs for ethics.
So,
At this point in the Ethics Bowl, there are a panel of 3 judges who would ask the presenting team questions. I will kind of play that role, ask them a couple of questions, and then I want to open it up to all of you to ask questions to either of the 2 teams about their presentations and responses. So as the judge, then I will come back to that role. To the presenting team, you kind of touched on this a bit at the end, Josh, but for the team itself, if satire is not the best way to expose conspiracy theories, what role might satire play?
Personally, I'm a big fan of satire. I follow a bunch of social media pages that are dedicated to satire. It's a big part of my life. And I think it has a place in helping us have a good laugh. And it can, and oftentimes it can release tension around really serious issues. And I think that we should still try and use it in that way. And it can help us start conversations sometimes. We just need to be careful to make sure that we're not, systematically targeting certain belief systems. And to try and show that this is about having a laugh, not about pushing people out of the group and ostracizing certain ideas. Because at the end of the day, a lot of these people, they're sincere beliefs, and you can poke fun at people's sincere beliefs, but just make sure it's clear it's just for fun, that it's not trying to push for something in society that is damaging or frightening for a lot of people.
Satire is also really helpful for self-realization. You can kind of laugh at yourself, the part of you that is a conspiracy theorist, perhaps, in coming across satire such as words aren't real. But as far as actually coming into building trusting relationships between people who are conspiracy theorists, it doesn't have a common ground of the beliefs about reality, and so it ends up just dividing groups further.
Another question might be, how would you distinguish a true from a false conspiracy theory? Or is there such a thing as a true conspiracy theory? And would that make a difference in how you approached it?
That's a really tricky one, because at the end of the day, I saw a comedian the other day. He was talking about conspiracy theorists, and he said, I don't like people who are conspiracy theorists, but I also don't like people who believe in no conspiracies at all, because who would believe that the government's been batting 100 for 100? And so I think at the end of the day, it's really tricky because we just don't know. And there are some conspiracy theories that we are pretty positive are really just conspiracy theories, but there is a degree of skepticism that is healthy in political and public discourse, for sure.
Once you started talking, I was like, oh, maybe I do response to this. Just that this idea of a true or false conspiracy theory it's a little irrelevant in that the whole crux of a conspiracy theory is that it's true for the person, right? And what's true for you is that is just truth. And so when we're talking about respectful dialogue, that's sort of what we're trying to hone in on, is remembering that this is true for this person or this group, and we would all benefit from remembering that when trying to have a discussion with them. And so whether or not there's a true conspiracy or a false conspiracy seems a little moot, I guess.
One last question. You mentioned the principle of beneficence. Could you maybe elaborate a bit more on how that principle supports your position?
So the principle of beneficence is focusing on having the good that comes from our action outweigh the harm. And the way that this tied into our response to the question is that we don't think that it's effective to be, our other two to contradict our other two principles of being disrespectful or not building trusting relationships. So the good would only come through our fulfilling of the other two principles and leading to the good for everyone, which would be the most good.
Just to add to that, if there were people that came to this conference today that believed in the conspiracy theories that we were addressing earlier, where would they be? They would probably be in their car somewhere else. Because when you start, all the other ways that we've tried to deal and expose conspiracy theories, they've systematically shown that they just don't really work like we think they're going to work. Like was talked about earlier, you push people off of a social media platform, it can actually fuel the conspiracy theories platforms that they build for themselves. And so at the end of the day, the reason we see this as being beneficent is because we see that it actually might work when other things just don't. And therefore it may be the best way to provide the most good and the least bad, which is the principle of beneficence.
At this point in the ethics bowl, the next team would be given a case. We go through the same thing all over again, but at this point, we're actually going to open this up and let you be part of the judges. So we have questions. Well, you can ask either team, even though in the competition it's usually just the presenting team.
This is a question for the presenting team. With regards to the eponymous conspiracy theory, satirical conspiracy theory, do you believe that this is on the side of being healthy satire, or more on the side of something that ostracizes and pushes people away?
So we don't think that satire is bad completely. In fact, we think satire has a lot of benefits. But our main point is that it's not the best way to approach conspiracy theories. So in this case, the words aren't real satire has value to people who view it as the satire that it is. They're benefiting from being able to laugh at it as a joke, or being able to mutually experience the frustration you can have with dealing with other people who believe in conspiracy theories. But it's not, this case specifically, is not the most helpful way to actually start to bridge gaps between people who believe in conspiracy theories and those who don't.
Fascinating response. Thanks.
I'd just like to add real quick that I think that maybe at the beginning when it first came out, it was just all positive, but it has definitely devolved into something that I don't think anyone of the creators thought it would be. And then on top of that, I think originally some of the creators saw this as an opportunity of a really big I gotcha. And if you mean an I gotcha in a funny way, that's great. But if you mean I got you to really try and show just how stupid the other side is, then this is not a good example of satire being used effectively or in the right way.
Any other questions?
My question is, this is mostly for the presenting team, but I suppose either can answer it. And I noticed that in a lot of your presentation, you talked about one of your goals was not to ridicule people's beliefs. I know you said something, you don't want to use satire in a way that's going to tear down something somebody sincerely believes. And my question is, do we have situations where, maybe people have belief systems that, or I guess my question is, can there be belief systems that, we do want to tear down, that we want people to not have those beliefs? When we get to things like prejudice or racism, or are there contexts where if you're dealing with someone who's saying something like, oh, we need to keep trans people out of sports because they're trying to invade women's spaces and hurt real women, right? Do we need to say, well, I think you might have a good point there, let's have a discussion about it? Or is the point where you need to call a spade and say, that's bigoted and it's wrong?
Yes, there is definitely a point where you would just say a truth, but that would be different than satire, where you would be, in a sense, making fun of someone's reality. And our presentation was really heavy on the emphasis that satire isn't a productive way, nor does it ever often actually change people's minds. And so in situations like that, certainly the goal would be we have to change this person's mind. They are entirely wrong with this perception. And so I think we would still hold that satire wouldn't be effective there by nature of it. It's making light of a very serious thing, whereas Birds Aren't Real is a little bit less serious, in my opinion. And we would want to be more straightforward than a satirical response.
I'm going to steal from Hash for a second. I think as well I want to point out the danger of the analogy to identity politics in this, in that the ideology that anyone can hold for whatever reason does not define what they deserve morally. It doesn't matter how much they believe the most ridiculous thing, they can become completely convinced that the earth is flat, and that does not change our relationship to them, in that we need to have a respectful discourse towards them in the same way that we would with anybody else. So, to put it more pithily, you might say that, yeah, ideologies sometimes really need to get torn down, but the problem is that people hold ideologies, so we always have to tread those waters carefully.
First of all, I really like that response, so thank you for that. And the question that I had, which I guess either side could answer, is if there is in a specific case a conspiracy theory that does cause damage, such as conspiracies, I'm not going to give examples, that might be a bad idea. But if there is a conspiracy theory that ends up causing a lot of damage, what is the best way to specifically address those situations where someone who, because of a belief they have, is causing some kind of damage or harm to either those close to them or those around them, simply because of this thing that they believe? What is the best way to address that?
I don't know if any of you guys went to the Healing Conversations conference that we had a few weeks ago. But honestly, I would love to just point to them because they address this very issue, which was, we have these tensions that we need to somehow navigate. How do we stop people from hurting each other? Because that's a serious thing. And a lot of what they focused on was trying to build these relationships that we've been talking about, and to focus on the relationships that people can build, but also they added, and I really liked this idea of respecting experience over belief. So if someone is talking with you, even if you can't respect their belief system, respect their experience, what they've been through. And I think that focus has, as we heard in their thing in the conference, has worked really well and has a lot of potential to work really well in helping us navigate and appease violent and aggressive situations.
Okay. So either side can answer this question, and it more goes into the adverse grouping of certain people. So with this, you mentioned that you don't really want to force any group of people into a box based on their beliefs or their adherence to those beliefs. With this, how would you go about the certain things that go with that? How would you define the individual from the belief? And it's not really great to say this outright, but we will. People are very strict with their beliefs. Their ideology is something they hold very, very, very close, and they're willing to sacrifice a lot of relationships for that belief. That contention is often created from this thing. Could satire see sort of a community in the comedy, building both sides of the bridge to have a laugh, but make that realistic?
I love this question, and it definitely seems like more of a psychological one than anything else. Oh, I called you out, like that. But it's certainly worth addressing here. I think that you've basically already illustrated the answer, in that within the situation that, well, insofar in which somebody believes something and you try to address that belief, you're automatically going to come in conflict with them, right? Because they are embodying the belief, and thus to disagree with the belief is to disagree with them. So in order to find any starting point, you essentially have to find a place in which that embodied relationship changes. And satire, as this case tries to argue, is certainly one way of going about that, by recognizing the fact that we can all be, well, basically satires can be made about all of us and what we believe. And that is a way of embodying a position in which we can communicate, we can relate. But there's plenty of other ways that you can reach that point. And I certainly think better ones. the classic example just being anything that allows us to recognize our humanity. When we begin to embody our humanity, it's a starting point that we can always empathize with.
We have time for one more question.
First of all, I want to compliment both teams for a very serious, academic, and respectful discussion. It seems to be based, the argument, the discussion seems to be based on a premise of evidence and logic and respect. And I'm going to suggest that we are in the post-conspiracy theory era. We are now in the conspiracy tweet era, which is based not on
No one's jumping on this. I will share my initial thought to this. This is actually something that we talked together as a group about to great length and could not be boiled down into this conversation. Because unfortunately, as much as we would like to address this academically, there is a lot of truth in the notion that this is conspiracy tweeting. Or in other words, that there is actually nothing substantive about the conversation that is brought up in most, conspiracy theories that are circulated nowadays. So as far as how satire might be related to that, that is actually, in my mind, the strongest argument for why satire could be useful. Because satire does something to our brains, it seems to me, in which we laugh at ourselves. And the ability to laugh at ourselves creates an intellectual honesty. It is kind of the point that I'm getting at, is that being able to recognize your own ridiculousness makes you humble intellectually, which makes you intellectually receptive. So the question in my mind to address your concern is, how can we reach points of intellectual humility, which would be intellectual, receptiveness, because otherwise we're just dealing with knee-jerk reactions and identity politics. As far as the best way to go about that, I don't know if it
First off, this is a great question. I mean, you stumped us for a bit there. But I would just like to point out that the question that we received today, which what we're responding to, is it the best way to expose conspiracy theorists? And there's a lot written into that question. I mean, what are the effects of trying to expose conspiracy theories? How do you do that? Because exposing something is in some ways an academic approach to begin with. And so when we are living in this environment where it's tweeted, there's nothing substantive behind these ideas that are being circulated so quickly and in such mass scales it's hard to imagine, it does really beg this question of, well, what do we do? And I think part of our response is that the entire concept of exposing conspiracy theories isn't going to work like you think it will, which I think is right in line with what you're saying. And so we need something else. And we've pointed towards relationships and trying to live together and respectfully, and how that works on an actual individual level, and how that actually will help to combat the conspiracy tweet environment. I don't know if we could necessarily say, but I don't know, this is just my thoughts. And I guess that concludes it.
Let's, by the way, if any of you are interested in joining the Ethics Bowl team, please come and talk to me. We'd love to have you join us. Let's give these brilliant students a round of applause. There's, I think, another session at 1 o'clock.
Yes.
So we'll take a little break from that. Thank you.
Yep.
This is a different setup.